This episode of Offbeat NOVA brings a bit of personal history into our exploration of Northern Virginia's offbeat and unexplored. It's about my journey of discovery, finding a lifelong hobby, an obsessive fascination with the Northern Virginia expat, and a fast food joint made famous in rock history 25 years ago.
This for all the old school fans. It's out the first record. It's called Weenie Beanie. It sounds like this.
I have a confession to make. It's going to be a hard one to admit to my fellow music lovers. Here it goes. I wasn't into Nirvana until much later in life. I know. I was very young when Smells Like Teen Spirit became the Seattle earworm that congested radio and television airwaves in the early 1990s. When Nevermind was released in 1991, I was only 7 years old. My experience with music up until then had been whatever my dad listened to. If you wanted to mosh to some Dan Fogelberg, James Taylor, or Jackson Browne in the early 90s, I was your guy. I knew all the words to Somebody's Baby and Run for the Roses long before I committed the mantra-like meanderings of the band's biggest hit inside a poorly ventilated high school gymnasium to memory. My first real exposure to Nirvana came just before the end of the band in 1993 for the televised Unplugged in New York concert on MTV. The entire concert blew me away. What impressed me the most, though, was their drummer, Dave Grohl. Throughout the concert, Grohl played an acoustic drum kit and sang backup vocals perfectly. He even picked up an acoustic bass for one of the songs. How could he be so good at more than one instrument? I had to know more. By the time I did my research about Grohl and the rest of the band, which in the early 90s meant combing through magazines at the local bookstore, Nirvana was over. Cobain died by suicide in April 1994, and the band broke up forever shortly after. Would I ever see my newfound musical hero again? As it turns out, I would. Unbeknownst to me, Grohl had been secretly recording his own songs while he played drums in Nirvana. Not only was he good at drums, singing, and bass, he was a hell of a guitar player. 6 months after Cobain's death, Grohl booked 6 days in a local Seattle studio to record what would become the first Foo Fighters record. Besides a few guest appearances, he recorded every instrument and sang every word. Foo Fighters was released on Roswell Records on Independence Day, 1995. I begged my dad to go to the local music store to get it. He eventually acquiesced my request, and we went to Planet Music in Virginia Beach. I can remember bringing my Sony Discman with me so I could listen to it immediately after ripping off the impossibly hard to remove shrink wrap encasing the compact disc. Keep in mind, Foo Fighters would not be my first grunge music purchase at that point. I had several already in my collection by July 1995, including Pearl Jam's 10, Soundgarden's Super Unknown, The Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream, and of course, Nirvana's Unplugged in New York. But I had never been more excited up to that point getting a record than when I bought Foo Fighters. The first couple of songs were fantastic off the bat. To this day, there are very few first tracks that hit harder than This Is a Call. The next two songs, which also became singles and iconic music videos to boot, still resonate with me. It's the middle of the album that I continue to go back to, with one song in particular. Standing up among a 3-song set exploring some differing styles such as 80s post-punk nostalgia, Good Grief, and grunge-drenched shoegaze, Floaty, is the 2-minute and 46-second brain melt that is Weenie Beanie. Weenie Beanie was the first song I ever heard that truly felt aggressive to me. The aggression felt good, even for a middle-class kid with a B+ average. The song starts loud and ends loud. Grohl's characteristic scream is put on full display here for the first time. The drums are open-ended with plenty of hi-hat filling the empty space between the drones of bass and guitar. The snare hits like hammers on your eardrums. The guitars are tuned down and turned up to a nearly uncomfortable level, It's a sound I would identify with for the rest of my life. Just because a song sounds angry doesn't mean it is about anger. Without sounding too nostalgic, the song is an emotional one. Every music lover has a genesis to their obsession. Mine happens to be Weenie Beanie. I couldn't play a single instrument when the eponymous release came out in 1995, but it undoubtedly spurred me to pick up my first, a black and white bass guitar, for my birthday in 1996. I still own and cherish that bass to this day. Over the course of middle and high school, I made it a goal to learn all the instruments Dave Grohl could play. I can play all of them now, in varying degrees of precision, or lack thereof.
Well, here's the first thing I ever recorded. I think it was in 7th or 8th grade, Code Blue. This is me on bass guitar, and I'm kind of scared to listen to it.
Can you hear that? I'm definitely talking about girls, and at this point I've never had a girlfriend before. But, 7th grade or 8th grade, I think my bass solo is coming up. So this is really, there we go. I think the tape has deteriorated. I mean, it's like 20 plus years old, but my first band, Code Blue, oof, it's really terrible. It wasn't until I was in college at James Madison University that I found out through some old archive interview that Weenie Beanie was named after a Northern Virginia fast food stand nearby where Dave Grohl grew up. I had to go. But geography, my lack of a vehicle, and my studies kept me from making a pilgrimage to this fast food holy grail. It's been 25 years since Foo Fighters was released. What better time to finally go to this iconic Northern Virginia establishment than now? Once we started the Offbeat NOVA project, it was the first thing I wrote down. We had to finally go, and I was not disappointed. Weenie Beanie is located just north of the Shirlington neighborhood in Arlington. The small restaurant, offering walk-up service only, no doubt a great boon for business in this current pandemic, sits unpretentiously in a small parking lot across from a park. I asked Angela to put the song on as we drove down Shirlington Road, where the restaurant was located. After 25 years, I had finally arrived. When I looked it up, Google said it was known for barbecue sandwiches and hot dogs. I wasn't feeling a hot dog on a hot summer day, so we decided on grubbing on a pair of barbecue sandwiches and fries. As we ordered, our daughter Zelda charmed all the waiting customers around us. It was so unbearably hot and humid that day, nearly 100 degrees, that all of us waiting for our food attempted to hang out in a small amount of shade the tiny orange eaves of the restaurant provided from the direct sunlight. After about 15 minutes, we finally received our hot bag of food. I brought it back to the car and cranked the air condition before eating my sandwich. The first thing I noticed was the bun. Normally a soggy afterthought to barbecue sandwiches, the bun was thick and toasted, holding all the seasoned meat and cool coleslaw together. I took my first bite of the barbecue sandwich as Dave growled into the chorus of the song inspired by the place I was finally eating at. The meat was warm with just a hint of spice to it. It also had a tang to it reminiscent of the North Carolina vinegar style I love so much. The coleslaw was not unlike the restaurant itself, simple and unpretentious. The sandwich reminded me of a better version of a famous drive-in restaurant I grew up eating at in Norfolk, Virginia, Dumar's. Whereas those sandwiches were small and soggy, the one dished up at Weenie Beanie was large, crispy, and filling. But I'm not finished. I haven't talked about the fries yet. Weenie Beanie serves large, wedge-cut fries with an addicting seasoned coating on them. Complemented by the sugary umami taste of ketchup, they were crispy and perfect. By the time the song was over, we were halfway through our entire meal. It was gone completely in another 2 minutes. We drove away from Weenie Beanie still sticky with sweat, but full and content with delicious food. It's definitely not a meal you can have all the time, but surely worth waiting nearly 30 years for. Eating there closed a very important chapter of my life, when music was still new and exciting. I highly recommend giving this local business your patronage. When you roll up on the unassuming establishment in your car, don't forget to crank the 7th track of the first Foo Fighters album when you do. You won't be disappointed.
Tell me the